I'd like to speak a little bit about an area that's been my specialty for over 16 years, and that is exercise and osteoporosis. Safe exercise in osteoporosis versus osteopenia, and what is that? Osteoporosis is the lessening or decreased bone density and bone mass that can result in fragility, and fragility just means they break easily. So bones such as our spine, our hips, and maybe even our wrist. And then versus osteopenia is a little bit, it's less than osteoporosis, which is actually considered a disease. And osteopenia might be diagnosed on a bone density test, just saying that you have a reduction and comparing you to other people your age. The other term that I'd like to clarify here is osteoarthritis. People often ask me what's the difference. Osteoarthritis is of your joints, and that can be a breakdown between the bones. There can be arthritis in there, which can cause pain, whereas the bones are the actual bone themselves and not the joint. Who is at risk of this lessening of bone mass and tendency toward fractures? Women, more so than men, especially in the first few years post-menopause, the first 5 to 7 years. There's a lack of estrogen and progesterone, which can increase their bone loss through that period of time. There are, after that 5 to 7 years, men and women have a more equal loss during that period of time, resulting in problems for men. But particularly with men, it would be close to 10 years later. For women, it could be as much as 1 out of every 2 women has a risk of an osteoporotic fracture of the spine, the wrist, and the hip. Why is this? Also, genetics play a role. The size of the woman, if she's a smaller, less than 125 pounds. Caucasian and Asian women tend to have higher risk of osteoporosis. Diet can play a role, medications can play a role, and exercise. How did we exercise through our life? Our bone density was built almost in utero before we were born. We were building our bones through our years to maximum at 18, and then at 30 years old, we stop building bone, we start pulling away from what's called our bone bank. So if you didn't fill up your bone bank when you were young with exercise and good eating and all those good habits, you can start at a deficit at those menopausal years, in particular for women. So I am very happy to be in the place of exercise. And how does exercise help your bone density? We want to show that it's the muscles pulling on the bone that are so important to help strengthen the bone. We can work on this in exercise through strengthening, in particular the upper back muscles, the back muscles in the rector spinae, the muscles of the hips, so that we can improve our balance, weight bearing, walking, dancing, anything where there's weight through the arm, through the legs. Swimming and bicycling are great cardiovascular exercises, but they aren't really considered weight-bearing exercises. Posture is hugely important in how our bones are made stronger through our life with gravity coming down, and that we're in really good alignment. So what I would like to talk about is a study that was done many years ago in the late 80s that looked at important exercise and how exercise can affect the spine. So this is my friend, and I have a spine, this is the top, and the pelvis, and her spine is here. And they took a group of 4 groups of women, and the first group they did flexion exercises. So that would have been, they did crunches, they did toe touches, so see this with a rounded spine, really bringing both knees and pulling the pelvis. That was the first group. The second group, they did more like shoulder blade squeezes, working the muscles at the back, cobra, some of the exercises lying on your stomach that we do in yoga. And the third group, they combined the exercises together. And the fourth group, they didn't do any exercise over this 2-year period. And what they found was so significant that the study was always changed, but it was so significant that we've learned that flexion kinds of exercises, rounding of the spine and closing down the front of our spine, can cause compression fractures and cause postural changes in our body, which can look like a stooped posture that some people get as they age. It doesn't mean that you have osteoporosis, that you have a rounded, stooped posture, but that can be a later sign. And also pain from fractures. Pain can also be from osteoarthritis, so we have to think about that. So what came out of that exercise study is that 89% of those flexion had compression fractures. So we're talking about the spine in this study. The second group had an increase in 18% fracture, so significantly less. The combined group had an increase of 53%, and the fourth group, where they didn't do anything, had an increase of 67%. So all that information shows us that the 89% that were in that first group doing all those rounding, toe-touching flexion exercises had a greater risk. So now we work on opening the chest and strengthening the back muscles and the upper back muscles to help keep us safe. This is all about keeping you safe and you learning what you need to do to make yourself safe in your exercise, whether you're in the gym, at a Pilates class, at a yoga class. So the important things to remember are high impact exercise might not be the greatest exercise for you to do if your bones are more fragile, like an osteoporotic spine. Things where there's bending and twisting. So any kinds of exercises like that, they're always able to be replaced with something that's more helpful and more effective to help build your bone density. The other thing that we will talk about and demonstrate is how important it is to have good posture. That even if you're rounded and you have rounded posture, we can start working on decreasing that stress on the front of the spine where the fragility fractures can occur. So here we go. We're going to show you a 20-minute video of exercises you can do to help strengthen your bones.